The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window as Margaret smoothed down her navy blue dress. At 58, she had learned to choose her battles carefully, but today felt different. Today she was bringing her children to her father's holiday brunch, something she had avoided for the past 3 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened her pearl earring. The last family gathering had ended in tears and accusations. But her children, Emma and Daniel, had been asking to see their grandfather. They were too young to understand the complicated history between her and her father, Robert. "Mom, are you ready?" Emma called from the hallway. At 12, her daughter still had that innocent faith that families could work through anything. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his young face serious beyond his 10 years. "We don't have to go if you don't want to." Margaret knelt down and took both their hands. "No, sweetheart, we're going. Family is important, even when it's difficult." The drive to her father's house took 40 minutes, but it felt like a journey back through time. Every street corner held a memory. The park where her father had taught her to ride a bike. The library where they had spent Saturday mornings. The man who had been her hero had somehow become a stranger. It had started small. Critical comments about her divorce. Questions about her choices. Then came the big argument 2 years ago when she had decided to go back to school at 56. He had called it foolish, a waste of time. She had called him unsupportive. Words had been said that couldn't be taken back. Or could they? Margaret pulled into the familiar driveway. The house looked the same. White shutters, green door, the rose bushes her mother had planted before she passed away 5 years ago. Her father still tended them every week. She took a deep breath and looked at her children in the rearview mirror. "Remember, best behavior. And if things get uncomfortable, we'll leave, I promise." They walked up the path together. Before Margaret could knock, the door swung open. There stood Robert, 74 years old. His hair completely white now, his shoulders a bit more stooped than she remembered. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then his eyes moved to Emma and Daniel, and something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps, or regret. "Well," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge. "I didn't think you'd actually come." Margaret felt her spine stiffen. This was already starting badly. "Hello, Dad. The kids wanted to see you." Robert's jaw tightened. He looked at the children, then back at Margaret. This was meant to be a nice day. "Why did you come?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Margaret heard Emma's sharp intake of breath beside her. She felt the old anger rising, the same fury that had kept them apart for 3 years. Her father hadn't changed. He was still the critical, difficult man who couldn't accept that she had her own life, her own choices. Daniel tugged on her sleeve. "Mom?" She looked down at her son, saw the confusion in his young eyes, and something shifted inside her. This wasn't about her and her father anymore. This was about her children watching how adults handled conflict. This was about showing them that you could walk away from toxicity even when it wore the face of family. Margaret straightened her shoulders and looked her father directly in the eye. "Should we leave?" she asked, her voice steady. Robert blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "Because if this is going to be another argument, if you're going to spend the day making snide comments about my life choices, then yes, we should leave. Right now. The kids don't need to see that." Her father's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes moved to Emma and Daniel again, really looking at them this time. Emma had tears in her eyes, trying to be brave. Daniel had wrapped his arm around his sister's shoulders. "I said," Margaret continued, her voice gaining strength, "should we leave?" "Yes or no, Dad? Because I won't have my children exposed to the same criticism I grew up with. They deserve better. I deserve better." Robert's face had gone pale. He gripped the doorframe as if needing support. "We can turn around right now," Margaret said. "We can go home and have our own holiday brunch. Just the 3 of us. We'll be fine. We've been fine." She took Emma's hand and turned to go. "Wait." The word was barely a whisper. Margaret stopped but didn't turn around. "Please," her father said, and there was something in his voice she hadn't heard in years. Vulnerability. "Please don't go." She turned slowly. Robert had stepped out onto the porch. His eyes were wet. "I'm a foolish old man," he said quietly. Your mother used to tell me that I'd drive everyone away with my sharp tongue. I told her she was being dramatic. But she was right. She was always right. He looked at the children, then at Margaret, Emma, Daniel. I'm sorry you had to hear me speak to your mother that way. That was cruel and unfair. Emma wiped her eyes. Grandpa, we just wanted to see you. Something broke in Robert's expression. He sat down heavily on the porch step, suddenly looking every one of his 74 years. I know, he said. And I've wanted to see you too. Every single day. I've driven past your school, Margaret. I've seen you walking the kids to the car. I've wanted to stop to say something, but I didn't know how to take back the things I said. Margaret felt her own eyes filling with tears. She had been so angry for so long that she had forgotten her father might be hurting T. Ooh, you told me going back to school was foolish, she said softly. You said I was too old to start over. Robert nodded, staring at his hands. I did. And I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Do you know why I said those things? Because you didn't believe in me. No. He looked up, his eyes desperate for her to understand. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? That you'd succeed. That you'd build this whole new life and realize you didn't need your bitter old father anymore. That you'd move on and forget about me. Just like I deserved. The confession hung between them. I watched you survive your divorce, Robert continued. I watched you work 2 jobs to support the kids. I watched you get up every morning with a smile even though I knew you were exhausted. And instead of telling you how proud I was, I criticized you, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. He wiped his eyes roughly. Your mother understood you in ways I never could. She knew how to encourage you, how to lift you up. Me, I only know how to point out flaws and problems. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was preparing you for a hard world, but all I did was make things harder. Margaret sat down on the step beside him. Emma and Daniel hesitated, then sat too, one on each side of their grandfather. Mom's doing really great in school, Daniel said quietly. She got all A's last semester. Robert turned to look at his grandson. Did she? Emma nodded enthusiastically. And she's helping other students too. The younger ones come to her for advice because she's so good at explaining things. She's going to be a teacher, Daniel added proudly. A really good one. Robert's chin trembled. He reached out tentatively and put his hand over Margaret's. His skin was thin and papery now, marked with age spots she didn't remember. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. I should have. E said it years ago. I should have said it every day. You're the bravest person I know. Margaret felt the tears spill over. I'm not brave. I'm terrified most of the time. That's what makes you brave, Robert said. You do it anyway. You keep going. You don't let fear stop you like it stopped me. They sat in silence for a moment. 4 generations of one family on a porch step, trying to find their way back to each other. The brunch is probably cold by now, Robert said finally, a hint of humor in his voice. We can heat it up, Margaret offered. I made your favorite, he admitted. The cranberry bread your mother used to make. I've been practicing the recipe for weeks. It's not as good as hers, but I wanted to try. Margaret felt her heart crack open. You made cranberry bread? I wanted today to be perfect, Robert said. I've been planning it for months. I sent the invitation hoping you'd come, but I convinced myself you wouldn't. And then when you showed up, I panicked. I fell back into my old patterns. The criticism just came out before I could stop it. Why didn't you just say you wanted to see us? Because I'm a stubborn, prideful old man who doesn't know how to admit when he's wrong. Robert looked at her with eyes full of regret. But I am wrong, Margaret, about so many things. About your divorce, about your education, about your choices. You're a wonderful mother. You're strong and capable and so much better than I ever was. Daniel leaned against his grandfather's arm. You're pretty great too, Grandpa. You just say mean stuff sometimes. Robert laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and sorrow, out of the mouths of babes. You're absolutely right, Daniel. I do say mean stuff sometimes. Too much of the time. Emma looked up at him. Can you try to say nice stuff instead? I can try, Robert said seriously. It might not come naturally, to me, but I can try. Will you help remind me if I forget? Both children nodded. Margaret stood up slowly. Should we go inside? Have that brunch? Robert looked up at her, hope and fear mixed in his expression. You'll stay? For an hour, Margaret said carefully. And if anyone says anything hurtful, we're leaving. This is a trial run, Dad. We're going to take this slow. An hour is more than I deserve, Robert said, getting to his feet. But I'll take it. And I'll try to earn more. They went inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. The dining room table was set with her mother's good china, the pieces Margaret remembered from childhood holidays. Robert had clearly put effort into this. As they sat down, Robert clasped his hands together. Before we eat, I want to say something. Everyone looked at him. I want to apologize, he said. Not just for today, but for all the times I let you down, Margaret. For all the times I chose criticism over kindness. For all the times I made you feel small when I should have made you feel strong. His voice shook, but he continued. I want to apologize to Emma and Daniel too, for not being part of your lives these past few years, for letting my pride keep me from my grandchildren. That was unforgivable. Grandpa, Emma said softly, it's okay. No, sweetheart, it's not okay. But I'm hoping we can work toward okay. Starting today, he looked at Margaret. I know I can't take back the past 3 years. I can't undo the hurt I've caused. But I want to try to do better. I want to be part of your lives again, if you'll let me. Margaret felt the weight of the decision. It would be so easy to say no, to protect herself and her children from potential hurt. But she looked at her father's face and saw something she hadn't seen in years, genuine remorse. Real change was possible. One day at a time, she said finally. You show us through. Ugh, your actions, not just your words. I can do that, Robert said eagerly. I will do that. They began to pass the food. The cranberry bread was slightly overcooked on one edge, but Margaret could taste the love in every bite. Her father had tried. That meant something. As they ate, the conversation slowly became easier. Robert asked Emma about school, really listening to her answers instead of offering unsolicited advice. He asked Daniel about his interest in soccer and didn't criticize when the boy admitted he wasn't very good yet. And he asked Margaret about her classes. Really asked, with genuine interest. I'm studying early childhood education, she explained. I want to work with kids who are struggling, who need extra support. Kids who might not have the most supportive homes. She didn't say it, but the implication was clear. She wanted to be for other children what her father hadn't always been for her. Robert nodded slowly. That makes sense. You're good at that. You always knew how to make people feel seen. It was the first real compliment he had given her in years. The hour turned into 2, then 3. Emma and Daniel asked if they could look at the old photo albums in the living room. Robert showed them pictures of Margaret as a child. Stories from before the criticism had built its walls. Mom was so little, Daniel marveled at a photo of Margaret at his age. She was a firecracker, Robert said with a smile. Always asking questions, always challenging me to explain things better. I told your grandmother she was going to be either a teacher or a lawyer. She's going to be a teacher, Emma said proudly. The best teacher, Robert agreed, looking at Margaret. She's going to change lives. As the afternoon wore on, Margaret found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't expected. This wasn't a miracle. Her father still made a few comments that had an ed. Gee to them. But he caught himself and apologized. He was trying. That was enough for now. When it was time to leave, Robert walked them to the door. He looked at Margaret with uncertainty. Can we do this again? Maybe next Sunday? Margaret hesitated. The old instinct was to say no, to protect herself. But Emma and Daniel were looking at her with hope in their eyes. And she had seen something today. People could change, if they wanted to badly enough. Next Sunday, she agreed. But Dad, you have to understand something. Anything. If you fall back into the old patterns, if the criticism starts again, we're done. I won't put my children through what I went through. They deserve a grandfather who lifts them up, not tears them down. Robert nodded, his eyes serious. I understand. And Margaret, I want you to call me out if I slip. Don't let me get away with. I need you to hold me accountable. I will, she promised. He pulled her into a hug, something he hadn't done in years. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I don't deserve it. We'll see if you earn it," Margaret said. But she hugged him back. As they drove home, Emma chattered about the photo albums. Daniel talked about wanting to show Grandpa his soccer trophy. They were already planning next Sunday in their minds. Margaret listened to them and felt a complicated mixture of emotions: hope and caution, love and wariness, forgiveness and boundaries. That night, after the children were asleep, she sat in her living room with a cup of tea. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her father. "Thank you for today. I looked up some information on active listening and positive communication. I'm going to do better, I promise." The fact that he was actively trying to learn and change meant everything. She texted back, "One day at a time, Dad." The next Sunday came, and the next. Each visit was a little easy. Our Robert still slipped sometimes, still let his critical nature show through, but he caught himself more quickly. He apologized more readily, and slowly, week by week, he became the grandfather Emma and Daniel deserved. 3 months later, Margaret had a presentation at school for her education program. It was a big deal, the culmination of her semester's work. She hadn't told her father about it, not wanting to set herself up for disappointment if he didn't come, but when she walked into the auditorium, there he was in the 3rd row. Robert, wearing his good suit, holding a small bouquet of flowers. After her presentation, which went beautifully, he came up to her with tears in his eyes. "I am so incredibly proud of you," he said. "You were magnificent." Margaret felt her own eyes fill with tears. "You came." "Of course I came. Emma told me about it. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. But I didn't invite you." "I know," Robert said gently. "And I understand why. I haven't earned the right to be invited to the important moments yet. But I'm working on it. Every single day I'm working on being the father and grandfather I should have been all along." He handed her the flowers. "These are from your mother's rose bush. She always said her roses bloomed brightest in the spring. Just like you, you're blooming, sweetheart. And it's beautiful to watch." That was the moment Margaret truly began to believe that change was possible. Not easy, not overnight, but possible. Over the following year, Robert continued to show up. To Emma's school play, to Daniel's soccer games where he cheered even though Daniel spent most of the time on the bench, to Margaret's graduation from her teaching program, where he stood and applauded longer than anyone else. He took a communication class at the senior center. He read books on emotional intelligence. He went to therapy to work on his critical nature and where it came from. He did the work, and Margaret did her work too. She learned to set boundaries without anger. She learned to accept imperfect change. She learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it did mean moving forward. One Sunday afternoon, almost 2 years after that first difficult brunch, they were all in Robert's backyard. Emma and Daniel were playing with the new puppy Robert had adopted, partly because he was lonely, and partly because his grandchildren had convinced him. Robert and Margaret sat on the porch swing, watching the children laugh. "Do you remember what you said that first day?" Robert asked quietly, "when you asked if you should leave?" "I remember. That was the bravest thing anyone has ever said to me," he said. "You were willing to walk away, to protect yourself and your children. I had never seen you do that before. I learned it from my therapist," Margaret admitted. "She helped me understand that I could love you and still have boundaries, that I could give you chances without giving up my self-respect." Robert nodded. "Your mother would be so proud of you, not just for going back to school or becoming a teacher, for standing up for yourself, for teaching your children that they don't have to accept being treated poorly, even by family." "You've changed too, Dad," Margaret said softly. "You really have. I'm trying. Every day I'm trying. I still mess up sometimes. Everyone messes up sometimes. The difference is you acknowledge it and do better." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the spring breeze carrying the scent of roses. "Margaret," Robert said finally, "can I tell you something?" "Of course. When your mother was dying, she made me promise something. She said I had to fix things with you. She said I had to stop being so hard on you, stop pushing you away with my criticism. She saw if I didn't, I'd end up a lonely old man with no one but regrets for company." His voice broke. I didn't listen. Even after she was gone, I kept doing what I'd always done. It took losing you to finally understand what she meant. Those 3 years we didn't speak, I was exactly what she warned me about. Lonely, full of regrets. Margaret took his hand. You're not alone anymore, because you're generous enough to give me another chance, because family is worth fighting for. Margaret corrected, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Robert squeezed her hand. Your mother would say that I'm finally learning what she tried to teach me for 50 years. That kindness is more important than being right. That love is more important than pride. It's never too late to learn, Margaret said. Emma came running up to the porch. Grandpa, the puppy dug up one of Grandma's rose bushes. I'm sorry, we tried to stop him. Robert laughed, and it was a warm, genuine sound. It's okay, sweetheart. We'll replant it together. Rose bushes are resilient. They come back stronger after they've been through tough times. He winked at Margaret. Kind of like families, as the sun set over the backyard, and they worked together to replant the rose bush. Margaret reflected on the journey they'd taken. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and hard conversations. There had been moments when she wondered if she was making a mistake. But watching her father gently teach her children how to tamp down the soil around the rose bush, his voice patient and encouraging, she knew they had made the right choice. Change was possible. Healing was possible. Sometimes you just had to be brave enough to stand up for what you deserved, and patient enough to let others rise to meet you. The rose bush they planted that day would bloom for many springs to come, and so would their family tea. Ended with care, and nourished by the hard work of forgiveness and change. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories about family, healing, and the power of second chances. Leave a comment below about a time when you had to make a difficult choice about family relationships. Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it.